Hello guys, welcome to the channel. This is the story about what if Naruto was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu x Highschool DxD Part 13. Before I start the video, please subscribe the channel for more fanfiction video and please share this video with your friends. This story was written by Havoc Tear. With any more interception, let's start the video. Kyoto Mountain Shrine. Pulling up and securing his Crimson Sage Haori above his old Anbu armor and Tonto on his lower back, Naruto looked into the mirror and commented, "Seems today's the day we can finally finish this." From the side stepped in Haku, in a throwback for the occasion. She was wearing a snow blue pinstriped outfit beneath a deep blue haori, the trimmings and obi matching the outfit beneath, with a shinobi mask on her hip, which brought back memories for Naruto. She stopped behind him, attempting fruitlessly to tame the mop of spiky golden blonde hair due to the importance of the day's main event, the Six-Path Pact Summit. All the major factions allegedly have a spot at this table. Western and Eastern Yukai factions, the Shinto, obviously, Heaven and the Church by association, the Gregory, the Devils, both new and old faction, technically speaking. In a strange, possibly first time ever, the typically unaligned, largely independent, sages of nature also have a voice. Thus, according to Haku's internal monologue, Naruto's spiky blonde hair, a key feature of his appearance and something she thoroughly enjoys running her fingers through, must be tamed for this event. Naruto, though, could feel her growing frustrations and was snickering, internally of course, along with the bulk of his tenants, and the futility of Haku's grievance with his hair. "Naru-kun, couldn't you just," Matabi began, but Kurama cut her off. "No shapeshifting. This is likely the last time we get this kind of entertainment before this stupid meeting." He chuckled deeply, the others nodding. Outside, Haku had quietly had enough and channeled her sage energy into ice accessories to secure Naruto's golden hair in a perfect low ponytail, then clipped the rest down using hair clips. You could very well feel the fear of the hair strands under her gaze, daring them to spike up. Clearing his throat, to break the intense not glaring Haku carefully, Naruto asked, "You ready?" Blinking, Haku looked to him then nodded with a gentle smile. "Of course, Naruto-kun." Inside Naruto's head, there were a few murmurings about how scary that look was, but nothing more than that. After retrieving his Uzumaki Shinto sword from the wardrobe, placed it on his hip, caliburn hidden in a spine sheath, Tonto at his lower back, twin kunai holders loaded with of the three-pronged persuasion, Naruto reached the door to his room where he found both Aoi and Izuna waiting for him. Haku approached a moment later. Aoi began when she arrived. "So, today's the day. You ready to stand in front of the supernatural world and declare your allegiance?" Naruto snorted, then quipped, "I do not serve them. None of us do. That's the point of this all." Izuna nods once, arms crossed, then offered, "Then set that boundary and do not concede to anything less." Naruto nodded once, then the Uchiha added, "Also, remember the rankings we came up with." Aoi frowned. "Sage culture isn't so uniform though. I understand why we came up with it and the perspective it allows others to see us as, but still." Naruto shrugged and Haku nodded. Izuna sighed, then reminded his wife, "I get that, trust me, trust us, we all do. But other factions work on hierarchy and status. This simply helps them understand, if only partially, sages in a way they can visualize. It isn't perfect, Aoi-chan." Naruto added calmly, drawing attention, as he continued. "But it should keep us safe in the longer term. Hopefully." "That, hopefully, is doing a lot of legwork, Naruto," Aoi remarked, getting smiles from the others. She sighs, then nods, and offered, "Fine, but these stupid ranks change nothing. You hear me, young man?" Raising his hands playfully in surrender, Naruto replied, "Never dreamed of it." Aoi's smile grew warm and soft, then she spoke, "Good. Now, let's wrap this up and then get out of here. I want to get back to my grove and train the cubs." Izuna added, "Agreed. It's bad enough I am working with an Uzumaki, but those devils just rub me the wrong way. Ugh. Naruto griped as the group closed their room doors, sealed shut, and began walking toward the stairs at the end. He added, I ended your clan in our world, don't make me repeat the feat here. Izuna glared heated flames back as he growled, just try it and you'll see what deep fried. Aoi yanked her husband back by the ear, Haku yanked hers, in her head at least, and separated the two grown-ass men acting like children. Both ladies sighed in unison. Sage's Clearing. New shrine. The Shinto-esque building, with its small second floor, and guarded by a front torii gate, that has since been decorated with shimenawa, sacred rice straw rope with white paper streamers, but kept bare cedar, by the Western Yukai faction. Naruto grew a day ago now, was now the central focus of multiple factions and meeting point. Security, understandably, was tight but not constricting. Due to the relatively isolated nature of the building, its out-of-the-way positioning, it meant anyone approaching was coming for one reason alone and made infiltration easier to spot. Now, as the four sages, Kateria and Kuroka, approached the building, they are met with by the host faction leader, Yasaka, by the front torii gate. Naruto nodded, then offered, Lady Yasaka, is everyone else here? With a light breath, Yasaka informed calmly, not everyone. Lady Artemis and Lady Demeter are present. Archangel Michael and Gabriel have also arrived. Governor General Azazel and Kadri Benamun are seated too. Nurarihyun and Magari are even present, already. Naruto nodded, but Kuroka clarified. Basically, NYA, just them devils are missing. Figured. Aoi commented flatly, her arms crossed and unimpressed. Just then a portal opened from the torii gate, drawing all attention from the group, and out stepped Susanoo, young look, long spiky black hair, golden eyes that lacked mirth this time. A light blue, swirling gray patterned kimono with matching light armor over his left shoulder, and a great sword on his back. His mere presence clearly shows the Shinto are taking security seriously. Next stepped out with a quiet serenity, long flowing Luna white hair flowing down his back, his kimono dark with white trim and loosely secured, but not indecently. His calm, regal expression, white eyes that seemed all-knowing and gentle, yet Aoi whispered his name for Naruto's sake. Lord Tsukuyomi. The deity in question nodded, but as he stood aside and allowed three more unknowns step out calmly. Naruto raised a brow, as did his fellow sages, but Kuroka got stiff as a board at the presence that stepped out, wearing Buddha armor, no weapon, and standing at 6'3", came none other than Indra, king of the gods and lord of heaven in the Hindu Parthenon. Immediately, stepping forward, the buzz-cut, greenish-brown-haired man kept his lavender eyes squarely on the sages and was clearly judging them mentally. Naruto, Haku, Izuna, nor Aoi looked particularly bothered by this, it was to be expected. Kateria kept her composure, mostly, adjusting her glasses 4 times in the 30 seconds of the stare down. Kuroka nearly had a heart attack, despite being ignored almost completely, but stayed behind her teacher. A light, polite cough broke the stare down between the Hindu god of war and the sages, eyes flowing to the other two from the same pantheon. A handsome young boy, normal features with a well-structured face but shiny blue-black hair. His sharp eyes held bottomless energy, and something Naruto couldn't quite name, though he did feel a bit annoyed by it. Unbeknownst to him, this was none other than Shiva, god of destruction within the Hindu pantheon. Beside them was a woman, probably considered beautiful even among other goddesses, Naruto mused briefly. Fair skin, long dark green hair and pinkish eyes. A relatively simple-looking white dress, black tie, and heels. The three shinobi had no idea this was Sarasvati, goddess of knowledge and creation. Aoi, Kuroka, and Kateria all did, if their nervous swallows were anything to go by. Amaterasu was the one to break the silence, as she stepped between the two groups and introduced Indra. Naruto tensed up immediately upon that name being uttered, a certain Uchiha coming to mind briefly. The action was noticed by all but the lone devil and Yukai present. Shiva, Sarasvati. This is the sage I mentioned prior. Amaterasu finished, gesturing to Naruto first and then added, Narian, sage of life. Life? Yet he wiped out many heroes. Indra countered, looking from his fellow leader to the sage. Naruto folded his arms, unapologetic about that incident. It was unfortunate, but he gave them chances. It's on them, not him. Tsukuyomi spoke next, in clear defense of Naruto's choice. The balance was directly attacked. Eyes drift from the blonde to the Shinto Luna god as he finished. As a being of life and nature, he acted well within his rights as a sage. This, I believe, has been explained prior. Sarasvati glanced from the Shinto god, then to the sages before resting on Indra, who said nothing but nodded. Case closed. Amaterasu then went on and gestured from one sage to the next, then onto their companions. Beside him, Miyuki, sage of ice. Natsuo, sage of fire. Aoi, sage of earth. Each name got a nod from their respective owner, before the sun goddess moved on to the two non-sages. With them, you know of my priestess, Yasaka. The strongest Kyuubi we have had, and leader of the Western Yukai faction. For some reason, Sarasvati's eyes flickered to Naruto at strongest Kyuubi, that he noticed but did not comment on. Amaterasu finished off the introductions. Then we have Kateria Leviathan, of the old faction Devils, and Kuroka, the Nekosho studying in sage arts under Narian. Shiva nodded once, then offered. Pleasure. Naruto's group all nodded, bowed in Kuroka and Kateria's cases, and the group was shown inside the neutral ground of the newly grown shrine. That fact still drew much attention from nature-related entities as there were no nails, signs of carving, and perfect panel alignment with zero cracks or imperfections in the construction. It took many restless hours to create the double door in the reception to the inner meeting chamber, and it still felt inadequate, despite its quality nearing ancient shrines found within Kyoto itself. Entering the single large chamber beyond the welcoming reception, a large simple circular table sat dead center of the room with 7 groups of chairs placed equally apart, with a set of 3 set slightly apart and behind the set of 4 at the other end, opposite the door. Indra glanced around at the building itself, more than its current occupants, and offered flatly, "This structure is unusual." Shiva too felt it, but again, Sarasvati glanced to Naruto once more, but he and the other sages were already making their way around to their designated seats, seemingly ignoring the comment entirely. Again, she said nothing. Sat around the edges were the very few guests attending from the various factions. Behind Gabriel and Michael sat Sariel, Zenobia, Irina, and Jordan, the exorcist captain, all quiet in their basic seats. Behind the seat Yasaka took sat that Hichibi Vixen, Sei Marika, and a large turtle dude in a kimono, arms inside his sleeves and looking like an elder of some kind. The only other guests sitting in for this were none other than Rias Gremory, Akeno Hamejima, Kiba Yuta, Kaneko Taju, Gaspar Vladi, Issei Hyodo, and Asia Argento, all in seats behind the empty space for the new Devil faction representatives. Standing at their side was the Maid Queen, Graphia, who was being ignored by the sages. Lest they forget this was neutral ground. Naruto, Haku, Izuna, and Aoi sat down at the place offered to them by Amaterasu, who sat behind on their direct left with Sasunu and Tsukuyomi. Yasaka's western faction sat on the direct right, with the eastern faction beyond that. Kuroka and Kateria sat behind the sages. The Hindu pantheon sat beside the Shinto, heaven beyond them, followed by the Grigori, and then the new Devil faction seats that remain empty still. A few eyes glanced towards the still empty Devil faction seats, fewer still slipped to the guests of said faction, that didn't react to the silent scrutiny, much. Naruto, though, was debating his council internally about what these people would be after from them and had his eyes closed, though could feel the stares and ignored them. Dryag warned. Those Hindu pantheon guys. They're pretty much the strongest ones here. No one wants to get on their bad side. Why weren't we told about them? Kurama pressed the red dragon, who let out a sharp breath. Diedrich explained honestly. Did not think they would bother. Then again, with so many powerful people gathering, it may have been inevitable. The other Bijuu all nodded, as Naruto's mental representation sighed, then asked. Pretty sure that Sarasvati woman knows more than she lets on. Dietrich nodded, then explained. She's the goddess of knowledge. One of the top 10 strongest beings in this world. Not to mention, one of the oldest. She always knows more than she lets on. That could be trouble. Yuki offered thoughtfully, though Matabi hissed. I don't like her at all. Seiken nodded, then Shukaku's cackled. Of course you don't. Did you see her? He didn't get to finish as he found his snout buried in the dirt of the mindscape, a flaming tail replacing where his head once occupied. Then, this Indra person. Naruto moved on, pretending Shukaku didn't just face-plant the dirt with help from his older, flaming sister. Dietrich nodded once, his tone grave. Not someone we should antagonize. We will not be cowed so easily. Kurama growled low, the other Bijuu nodding, beside Shukaku, who was still face first in the dirt. Naruto nodded along with them, then stated. We have to tread carefully. That woman is unnerving, but manageable. Dietrich chuckled lowly, then offered. Then, Naruto, be sure to call upon us should you need help. I will, but more importantly. Naruto began, then glanced over the gathering of beings. I'm more concerned with what each faction will ask of us. I doubt they'd just leave us alone if we don't give them something in return. The way of the arrogant. Son Goku confirmed with a nod, arms and legs crossed. Yuki responded. Commit to nothing, consider everything, within reason. Naruto nodded. Kurama added sternly. Make it clear we are not for sale. His scarlet eyes hardened. We have been used too many times before, never. That goes without saying, Kurama. Naruto cut in, eyes of diamond as he looked to his longest friend. His gaze then swept over each being present, one after the other, then he continued. As you have all said, we can't run forever. A pause, as he glanced to Kakuo with a smirk, despite popular opinion. The dolphin horse smirked, the others chuckled, and then Naruto continued. We will help, if needed, but we won't serve anyone. We will live free. Period. No conditions. No objections. He grinned and they matched it. Kurama glanced up, then stated. Looks like those slavers just arrived. Scoffs from around the mental space, with even Dietrich chuckling lowly, with Naruto looking up directly, then he nodded once, returning outward. Just as Naruto's eyes slowly part, opening up, his blues land on the small delegation from the new devil faction that had just arrived. As the red glow from the transportation circle in the front reception died, it revealed 3 individuals. The first to enter was the ever-handsome, early 20s looking, crimson-haired, blue-eyed Sears X Lucifer, Satan of the new devil faction. He glanced around, realizing that they were the last here, and offered. Forgive our tardiness. Our council ran over. Beside him stepped in a teenage-looking, black-haired woman with a childlike body, for some reason, and pink eyes filled with restrained amusement, projecting instead something rather innocent. This was Seraphal Leviathan, the diplomat Satan. She bowed lightly. Sorry we're late. The last in was a new face to the sages. A middle-aged man with black hair and calm violet eyes while being dressed like someone excessively rich. Like, more money than sense, if you asked Naruto. It was Azazel, the leader of the Gregory, who asked, brow arched. Zekrom Biel. What brings you of all people to this meeting? Naruto noticed that the Governor-General was tense, his eyes locked on this new guy, and a quick check showed the other angel guys looking uncomfortable too. Neither Yukai group looked particularly pleased with this newcomer either. Maintaining his blank face, Naruto and his inner council of beings suspected that this guy was likely going to either piss them off or be the first to take a Bijuu Dama to the face. There's no in between. Zekrom glanced to the leader of the fallen angels, then remarked. Why would I not be, Azazel? This is an historic moment. It is only natural for one such as I to be involved. Azazel snorted, leaning back on his seat, but said nothing further. With the new devil faction now in their seats, Amaterasu stood and drew attention from all but Naruto, whose eyes instead flickered behind Artemis and Demeter breathily, before looking to the hosts. With a soft clearing of her throat, Amaterasu opened elegantly. With everyone here, let this meeting of the Six-Path Pact commence. A few nods before she continued. Due to several incidents over the last few months, confrontations, and revelations. The younger eyes flickered to Naruto, who was certainly not bored with this already. It has been decided to hold this formal meeting, Amaterasu explained, then finished, to prevent further bloodshed or escalations of conflicts. As hosts, we the Shinto of Takamagahara, will be officiating today. Please be respectful and courteous of one another. She finally sat down and immediately, Azazel spoke bluntly to the four sages, just to be clear. Eyes flowed to him. Azazel continued. My faction holds no ill will to you or yours. Benemune nodded once, though Michael added. We of heaven, very much have no ill will for any of you. Aoi raised a palm and the others, preparing for official statements, fell silent. After a breath, she explained. There seems to be a misconception here. Let me clarify. All eyes were on her beside the sages. Thus, she stated flatly. There is no sage faction, or anything like that. A strange confusion set down, so Aoi added. We don't even have ranks, in the traditional sense, like all of you do. Intrigued, Sirzex inquired carefully. Then, how do you explain your cooperative activity until now? Eyes flicked to the red-haired Satan, who pressed, from the reports I have received. We were curious. Izuna stated flatly, eyes falling to him as he added. We sensed a new sage from our home. He felt familiar to me. Thus, we came to look for him. A shrug later, and the Uchiha finished. As soon as we're done here, we are leaving again. It's just that simple. Naruto nodded, then added. We're just friends meeting up. You all just happen to be here. Haku nodded once, Aoi then added. We remained here to catch up, show our cubs others like us, and, after we heard what's happened. She looked to the new devil faction, smile empty. We decided to hang around, for now. The message landed as intended. None of the devils at the table lowered their heads, face level and confident. After a moment, Aoi let out a tight breath, then announced. Though, we are also aware that you all want to classify, or rank, as in a way that is familiar to you all. Leaning forward onto his elbows, hands clasped on the desk, Azazel offered. That would be useful for us. Do you not have such ranks? No, Izuna reported clearly, stiffly. We have no direct nor unified framework that you all do. We have discussed it, thus, a basic one has been agreed upon. Indra leaned forward now, then pressed. From what we have seen and heard within our pantheon, your actions match an archetype we are familiar with. We are not of your pantheon. Naruto stated flatly, eyes sliding to the god calmly, tone unbending. He finished. We belong to none. Do not assume otherwise. Indra met his gaze but said nothing more. Michael spoke next, voice soothing. Perhaps, we should hear this framework of yours. A moment, before Naruto stated. There are 5 ranks that we have come up with based on senjutsu capabilities. He begins to list them on his hand while everyone focused on this. Scribes prepared writing utensils as he explained. Level 1. The common yokai and certain demigods fill this level. Yasaka, Nurarihyun, and Magari all rose brows at this, though Naruto continued. Basic or fundamental nature capabilities are found here. Level 2 would be senjutsu-based yokai and common nature spirits. Aoi announced, then looked to Yasaka then added. Like you, Yasaka, but also. Looking to the white-haired devil cat, Aoi added, and you, little one. Kaneko perked up, then looked to Yasaka, who looked back, both confused as their power level was vastly different. Serafal interjected here. That makes no sense. Lady Yasaka and little Kaniko's power levels are vastly different. Izuna and Naruto shrugged in unison. The former stated, "Basic framework. This is not for us, but so you all can interpret us on a way you can manage." That barely addressed anything, most realize. Naruto continued. Level 3. Strong nature spirits and basic sages, the trainees and newly graduated, are here. Surprisingly, Sarasvati seemed to nod subtly at this all and probably as the one of a few who was starting to understand this framework. It was basic, crude even, but manageable. Artemis, who was following along, proposed thoughtfully. So, that would include my own handmaidens too then. At least, my older ones that have served me for centuries. Naruto looked to Aoi, who was also thoughtful for a few moments, then stated, I believe most would start at level 1 with demigods. Though, from what I have observed of them, I believe your lieutenant is very much a level 3. Artemis nodded, now more inclined to understanding this very basic explanation of capabilities than most others. Demeter too looked almost satisfied. Hold up. Azazel called, drawing attention to himself, before he continued. This doesn't make much sense to us in the biblical faction. Is there a conversion we could have? The four sages shared looks silently, yet Artemis offered, I believe. All three biblical leaders looked to her as she explained. In your terms, a single level 3 sage is comparable to the devil's full combat units. Gesturing to Rias and her peerage, Artemis stated, it is situational and based on what we have seen from this peerage here, but I believe a full set of them will be defeated by a single level 3. Seraphal looked from the Greek goddess of the hunt to Rias and her group, then to the sages and asked, how can that be? Sasanu spoke now, voice authoritative. I believe that the black cat, Kuroka, is considered a level 3 in this system. Thus, if your peerage cannot beat her, it stands. The devils all looked to Kuroka, then to Yasaka, then the only devil peerage present. Sei cut in. Wait. How is a Nekosho stronger than a Kyuubi? Aoi, Izuna, and Naruto let out sighs of various flavors, while Haku just kept a pleasant smile. Izuna grumbled, didn't we say this was a basic framework? Aoi rubbed her brow, letting out a frustration grunt, unladylike, before she explained. Although basic, the kitten is an apprentice of a sage. Thus, falls under the criteria for level 3. Despite the contemplation, those of the biblical faction accepted it for now. Aoi continued. Level 4 is filled with true sages, older nature spirits, and nature gods. Blinking, eyes shifted from said gods of nature in attendance and the 4 sages. Demeter inquired. So, that means I am considered here along with my siblings and niece. Izuna replied. Yes, Sirzex asked, so you all fall here? The looks shared between the sages was purposely subtle, before Naruto continued. Level 5, Advanced Sages and Elder Gods. Indra commented, then we fall into this category. Naruto led the sages in the flowing shrug, then he added, with that said, you all want something from us. He paused, glancing to the devils before he finished. So, speak up now, so you can leave us alone. Backs straightened, but before anyone could speak, Amaterasu spoke up. Before that, all eyes shift to her. Naruto's flinch was so subtle only Haku and Sarasvati noticed, but no sign of what caused it. The Shinto sun goddess continued. At various levels, you all have expressed interest in the sages for various reasons. It is understandable. No sage has been even negotiable before now. Naruto looked to Aoi, who smiled knowingly and completely unapologetic of this stance. Amaterasu added gracefully, however, this time we have. This 6-path pact is our way of working with the sages to maintain oversight, balance, and mutual understanding between us all. Before anyone else could add, Naruto reminded. That, sure, but also. He looked hard at the devils, then spoke. Do yourselves a favor and give up trying to enslave me again. Didn't work the first time, and sure as shit ain't going to work next time. Now that I've analyzed them, at length. All eyes shifted to the new devil faction. Sears was about to speak, but unfortunately Zekrom did. Ah, yes. That little unfortunate misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Naruto asked. A single brow in hairline as the air notably dropped a few degrees as an indication that Haku may not be too thrilled with the concept either. Of course it was. Zekrom insisted calmly, but Azazel cut in voice unusually stern. Counselor Biel. How, exactly, was that a misunderstanding? Exactly. Leaning forward on the desk, Zekrom laid out the situation. It is evident that the Gremory heiress did not know the importance or station of Menma Maelstrom. Yet, her compassion urged her to sacrifice one of her limited rook pieces. Do yourself a favor, Naruto cut in, unapologetically, voice as cold as the Arctic desert, his blue eyes as frigid as the void itself. The room dropped enough degrees that Amaterasu began trying to heat it subtly, but one glance to Haku told her it was useless. The sage was pissed. All of them were. When Zekrom's violet eyes met the Arctic blues of Naruto, the blonde finished. Shut up, before I lose my limited, remaining restraint I have for you faction. The air is tense and only got more so when a very familiar presence to all flickered from the sage, his eyes briefly flickered deep green, and the distinct pressure of the Red Dragon Emperor vanished the moment later, reminding everyone that he too was present. And he had chosen a side. Zekrom did not react, for that would signal submission or acknowledgement. He offered neither. Surprisingly, it was Shiva who spoke next, when he inquired, "What is the goal to be achieved here, exactly?" Amterizu answered, "Stability." All looked to her and she informed. Due to several factors, many have sought the power of Sage Narian. Instead of the constant battles, it was decided that this forum would be best. Indra then posed. Then, your fight with the hero faction? I gave them plenty of warnings. Naruto responded flatly, then looking to the giant of a man, he added unapologetic of his actions. 3 chances. The beach in the south, strike 1. That academy, strike 2. Now this forest, strike 3. Normally I give 1. This time, they crossed the line and thus, I removed them. He shrugged, then finished. I have learnt the hard way that mercy allows others to presume you are weak. Mistake restraint for inability. I simply showed the difference. None could really argue that. Most, if not all, were aware of each instance and the sage had indeed given them warnings. Aoi spoke next, voice dry. So, make your requests. We do not have all day. A strange tension developed as the others shared looks about who would go first, though Naruto was smirking internally with his council of beings, who were making running bets about who first. Michael of Heaven would break the silence, standing and drawing attention to himself while Saiken got smug as the winner. Clearing his throat, the leader of Heaven began. We, of Heaven, wish to cover your life energy, from what we have learnt, from my sister Gabriel, that your ability may be able to aid us in our continued protection of humanity. A few brows raised, Naruto recalling how they keep calling him the future of Heaven for some reason. Michael continued carefully. We hope that you will consider, as a part of this pact, that Unarian will allow cooperation with our researchers and hope to find solutions to the misalignment that we have drifted from. Even the few guests along the sides had shared looks, unsure what it was actually being said. For Naruto, it was Diedrich who laid it out plainly in his head. Heaven and, by extension, the fallen are unable to produce new angels. Likely, the find solutions is covering that base. Kurama chuckled, then quipped. They want creation of all things, huh? Seems like it. Yuki added with a sigh, then looking to his container. Naruto boy, watch yourself with promising this one. If you manage it once. Shomei commented, drawing eyes to the 7 tails. They will never allow you free rein to fly alone. Giggling, Shukaku voiced. Let them try, I'll be careful. Naruto cut him off, just as Matabi dealt with her younger brother once again. As they all nod, he finished. I'm not making any binding promises. Never again. You are wise, Naruto. Dryag offered, drawing the blonde's attention and turning round to face the large red dragon emperor. The dragon grinned, then offered. We shall offer you advice as we go on. We are all in this together, no? Grinning himself, Naruto nodded before focusing back to the outside world in time for Azazel to state blankly. No, counselor. The Gregory is backing the project Michael has presented. If anything, it is about time they look internally at their systems that need improvement in this modern age. Waving that off, Zekrom countered. That sound more like militarization. Was this not a pact to ensure stability? How does heaven rearming achieve this? I have to agree with the devil here. Nurarihyun commented, drawing attention to one of the East Yukai faction leaders. The weird-shaped headed Yukai pressed. We have had more than enough interference from your sub-faction, the Church, in recent years. If you regain your strength. Those were not authorized operations. Michael stated calmly, but the Eastern Yukai faction waved that off. Nurarihyun countered. Authorized or not. Your lack of accountability is far more concerning. Increased military presence thus is unwelcome. I doubt that will be an issue. Azazel began. Almost immediately Zekrom countered. Naturally, if heaven gains more strength, that would bleed down into your own faction, Governor. As fractured and disorganized as it is would only cause more issues on the larger picture. Gritting his teeth discreetly, Azazel knew his forces were in fact the least cohesive and filled with plenty of troublemakers, despite being the smallest of the three biblical factions. Worst still, they had no real allies to call upon. Michael spoke up again. Our stance in heaven has not wavered. To protect humanity, not control them. Yes, we have some influence over the Church, but ultimately, we do not dictate to them. Convenient excuse. Zekrom offered, almost sympathetic until Kateria offered with a roll of her eyes, arms crossed as she then snipped. A convenience you have no doubt exploited. Zekrom regarded the old Satan faction devil for a brief moment, before he countered. I am sure, you speak from overwhelming experience and knowledge on such, no? Unapologetically, Kateria shrugged then announced. Well yes, naturally. Zekrom stared back with a strained, diplomatic smile that masked his surprise at the open admission of this Leviathan House member before this collection of powerful factions. More so, the Sage faction than even the Hindu faction. The amusement in his tone was not masked when Izuna commented, now that we know what the angels want. Leaning on the table, smirk arrogant and confident while looking upon the devils. What will it take for you devils to behave? And before you ask, I am not going back to the redheads. Slavery, disguised as family. Naruto added helpfully, eyes reflecting absolutely no remorse for prior actions taken against them. Again, before any of them could speak, Sasunu added bluntly. I would also want to know why, even now, you have Narian listed as a rogue rook, as Menma Maelstrom. He is no devil, and your claim to him is clearly invalid. Even Indra raised a brow at that, his hands clasped before him, looking at the three devil leaders at the table. Shiva shook his head in disapproval. Sarasvati's face was blank as she too stared at the underworld inhabitants for answers. Clearing her throat delicately, Sarafal stood and announced. Firstly, to address Lord Sasunu's concerns, Menma Maelstrom's current status is still under internal review and discussion up until we left for this meeting. This is due to this being a new situation and has not been accounted for in our laws. Your laws, Naruto growled lowly, glaring unapologetically at the two Satans and the counselor. The grow lowered in frequency and set the Yukai present on edge, tails going still, fluffing lightly and spit swallowed as he hissed. Do not apply to me. Or should I remind you the hard way? That is not very diplomatic of you. Zekrom countered, eyes narrowing lightly. He then pointed out. I thought this was a cooperative pact. Mutual respect. Joining hands for a brighter tomorrow. That's the point. Izuna entered this verbal debate, drawing eyes to his own narrowed black eyes as he added. Denying the freedom of others is something we will not stand for. Yet you associate with the likes of Kateria. Zekrom countered, drawing eyes to the deviless in question, who adjusted her glasses softly. He added, "A member of a terrorist organization that has repeatedly, on record, been a destabilizing force to achieve their goals." Nodding, Naruto stated, "To which I am aware of." A collective blink. Kateria remained blank-faced, before he clarified, "However, I am not dealing with the entirety of what you called Old Satan faction, but Kateria Leviathan herself." Leaning forward on his folded arms, Naruto's voice lowered to ice as he added, "And unlike your government officials, she has been upfront with me. I know her goals, they might clash with mine, but she at least is upfront with me about them. Can you say the same?" "In fact, we can," Sirzex answered flatly, drawing the frigid gaze of the blonde and the other sages. He stated clearly, "You are listed as a rogue devil. By our laws, you are to be contained and have your peace reinforced with." "I destroyed that peace," Naruto interrupted, then gestured to both Azazel and Gabriel. He then added, "Azazel, Gabriel, and Yasaka all saw its destruction." Lady Seraphol also already confirmed it via her earlier statement. Michael informed calmly, completely innocently, but the shinobi present knew the calm incarnate man was enjoying himself. Azazel nodded, his smirk barely contained as he pointed out, "Indeed, I can confirm both the destruction of the evil peace, and the comment of Lady Seraphol not long ago." His grin became predatory. "So, that clearly shows that Narian, the sage of six paths." Indra, Shiva, and Saravasti visibly sat up at that title, Naruto noticed. Azazel continued, almost casually, "Is not a devil. In fact, he is such a non-devil that your so-called rogue, Black Cat, Kuroka is also not a devil." Benamun followed up, "Naturally, neither are subject to your laws. Unless, of course, you are applying such laws to subjects of other factions, particularly when you have stressed previously that, upon reincarnation via evil peace, beings are classed as devils and fall under your preview." Adjusting her glasses, leaning back with arms under her sizable bust, the chief secretary of the Gremory finished. "And, as you can no doubt sense, neither Lord Narian nor Lady Kuroka have evil pieces, let alone any devil presence within their signatures." A smirk worthy of the 10 beasts within him slipped onto Naruto's face, his own commitment to his freedom mixing in as he leant forward on the desk and stared hard at the underworld residents as he spoke. "Your move, slavers." Seraphol stood up sharply, hands flat against the table as she stated firmly, "We do not enslave anyone." No one reacted, pushing her on. "Reincarnation is a gift we bestow upon those who seek our." "That's bullshit and we all know it." Azazel cut in, drawing her glare upon him. Nurarihyun, surprisingly, added smoothly, "Your so-called gift is a plague and a cause for no end of problems for our kin." His eyes narrowed on the Satans, who looked back at him. The devil counselor dismissive gaze irked the Yukai leader. Nurarihyun stated vehemently, "We have consistently suffered at the hands of you devils forcing our members into." "You have no evidence to prove that." Zekrom cut in, not even gracing the man with a look and tone flat. Though, when he glanced to the Hindu faction, their silence unnervingly polite, he then looked to the sage and amended, "However, Menma, we are not so inflexible to dismiss your concerns." Izuna and Naruto shared a look. Haku too glanced between them. Aoi just looked unimpressed and done with this, more interested in getting back to her cubs. Sirzex sat up straight before he spoke. "I can assure you, Menma, that we are fully invested in this cooperative treaty among our peers. Your case is being handled directly and properly to ensure that we are all fairly treated and fully transparent with." "Fairly," Naruto muttered low, yet still all fell silent. He raised a brow, then asked, "It's simple. A basic right to self-autonomy. What is so difficult to understand?" Azazel chuckled, leaning back, but Michael looked somewhat conflicted. Izuna's gaze was stoic, Yasaka nodded, and Magari licked her paw while grooming herself. "I think you are forgetting something, Menma." Zekrom stressed the name, causing the sages to finally all look to him properly. With his purple eyes locked on Naruto's blues, he enforced. We do not move because you dictate terms to us. We move because we chose to. Sears looked to him, eyes urging him not to proceed. Izuna's eyes told of his amusement. All always hardened. Haku's became molten ice, and Naruto raised a brow, but all stayed silent along with the other delegates. It was tense. Zekrom broke it, carefully as he spoke. We have come here to show our commitment to this six-path pact you seem to have initiated. His hand waved around rather airily, though Naruto corrected offhandedly. Actually, that was Deedrake's idea. The dude is super pumped about the whole idea. Regardless, Zekrom waved off, before he continued smoothly. We feel that adding our weight behind this cause is not something we ought to do lightly. Oh, this'll be good. Naruto muttered, his inner counsel nodding, though his eyes flickered to the shadow beside the younger redhead, who was facepalming. What are you saying, exactly? Artemis pressed, arms crossed and eyes watching every twitch of this slimy man. When the devils regarded her, she added sharply. That the world must accommodate for you. You think too highly of yourselves. Unlike a tertiary pantheon, Zekrom continued, not acknowledging the goddess he could handle himself. Instead, he focused on the sages. With the exception of our friends in the Hindu pantheon, we are the driving force here, providing manpower, security, and legitimacy. Out with it. Azazel sighs. This was traditional of the damn devils. Damn obvious. The Shinto trio did not react either, though they too were frowning lightly at the words spoken, along with both Yukai factions. Demeter's hand on Artemis' arm was the only thing stopping her from pulling out a knife right then. Rias hadn't lifted her face from her palm, her peerage nervous at the growing tension. Clearing his throat, Sears attempted to placate the situation. We are committed to peace, honest. Forcing something on an unwilling individual, via external factors, to override their free will, is still considered indentured servitude, right? Naruto inquired, repeating his words from the battle at the school. He knew it hit home as he watched the recollection play across the two Satan's faces, and the light throat clearing from Kateria behind him. Haku, for the first time, corrected him gently. More specifically, without informed and voluntary consent, no binding agreement exists. And if obedience is still enforced regardless. She pauses briefly, for theatrics. Then it is not servitude. It is slavery, formalized. Demeter leaned slightly towards Artemis and whispered lowly, "Oh, I like her." The Greek goddess of the hunt nodded once, her smirk barely contained. All eyes looked back to the devils, who were staring at the dark-haired sage unashamedly and witnessed Naruto and Izuna bumping fists in a classic "I rest my case my friend just settled" way, and were now waiting for their response. Clearing his throat, Sears offered carefully, "You raise a valid concern. However, the evil peace system is not designed to strip will, but grant opportunity." Naruto snorts, but the Satan did not stop. Revival, power, and purpose to those who would otherwise have none. The looks shared between the others in attendance showed how shaky that response was received, but it did buy Sears the time he needed to think of a more complete counter. "That's not fair," Seraphal blurted out, standing and gaining the attention of most. "We save them. They're dying, or already dead normally. What are they supposed to do? Just disappear?" Yet not a single sage even looked remotely fazed by her emotional spin, or framing as rescuers. After all, even if true, there are thousands more cases, other reincarnations that are far less honest or emotionally driven, their driving factor being one of greed. Azazel countered smoothly, "You're bending a very scant few edge cases, Seraphal, and we all know it." Seraphal did not back down, but the old counselor of the new devil faction decided to take charge now. Zekrom countered the argument. "Your entire argument hinges on the assumption that consent must be absolute. Tell me then, even among your kin, is there not an order binding you?" Aoi, then Izuna, then Haku, and finally Naruto, raised brows in sequence. They thought this was covered already. Zekrom added. Does power not impose structure? Or is it only objectionable when we do it better? Both sides of the yokai bristled with barely contained anger at such an dismissive attitude. Michael and Gabriel shared a look, though Sariel was staring dead in the eyes of this devil, her thoughts her own. Xenovia beside her too did not really know what to say about that. Naruto could sense the growing rage from his new student at his back, but before she could blow a fuse, he decided to act. With a long exhale, drawing eyes to him, he muttered. Structure, huh, that's actually somewhat refreshing to hear. Zekrom had expected several pointless arguments, but that was definitely not one of them. Indra, Shiva, and Sarasvati, however, knew better than to interrupt a wandering Rishi king according to their own current interpretation of the sage before them. Leaning forward, the air suddenly tensing by the action, Naruto regarded the trio of devil leaders and added, almost pleasantly, that simplifies things. He nods calmly, as if in thoughts, though Izuna's growing, very sharp smirk was telling as the blonde finished, tone still pleasant. Structures, after all, can be removed far more easily. The silence that followed was era-defining. No one dared breathe at this point, as if the moment was a delicate glass ornament that might shatter if they do too hard. The young devils present had their hearts in their throats in disbelief and fear in equal measure. That was not a declaration. That was a statement of intent, and they knew better than most that he was capable of implementing it. Indra watched this with silent amusement, Shiva detached curiosity, but Sarasvati knew full well that these sages were not playing around. They had perceived a threat to the balance and now planned to correct it. It was that simple. Artemis was both impressed but also thinking on how her father could position himself to gain favor with Narian. It is clear he does not respect one's standing, but a moral one. Historically, her father has not exactly been ideal in that regard. Sasunu's grin was firm, unshakable, and knowing. He knew full well that Naruto did not make threats, he made promises. And this promises to dismantle everything the new devil faction has become, and he was going to need to grab a lot of popcorn for this outcome, as no doubt Indra would want a front row seat too. Surprisingly, Michael was on edge like never before. He's faced the worst of devil kind at the thickest of the fighting during the biblical wars. Yet, Narian's statement suggests that he is more than capable and even more motivated to dismantle an entire faction due to this misalignment on one issue. It could destabilize far more than just the underworld, thus caution must be maintained. Kateria was having the time of her life seeing the posers sweat under scrutiny of such a powerful group for their views on the freedoms of others. Sure, her own faction seeks world domination and has a worse track record, but at least they are open about it, thus the sages have somewhat more respect for them due to it. Kuroka's twin tails had stilled at the sheer audacity of her new sensei, but that was slowly forming into both cold satisfaction and smug glee at the thought of tearing apart those who condemned her. Within the next moment, Sirzex stood up, realizing that this can still be salvaged, his faction spared, and thus, he offered delicately. Then it is fortunate that we are here to ensure such measures are unnecessary. No one moved to oppose him, though Serafal did nod, and so he proceeded. If concerns of autonomy exist, then we are willing to review and refine our system. Ensure that consent is always preserved. That any abuses are addressed firmly, without compromise. A structure can evolve, rather than be simply discarded. Serafal nodded on total agreement, all eyes flowing from them to the sages who had not reacted as of yet. Likely, still in consideration. With the room still focused on him, Sirzex finished. Safeguards can be introduced. Oversight can be established. If deemed necessary or appropriate, amendments to the system's implementation can be explored. Izuna glanced to his wife Aoi, a silent discussion of which many assumed was on the statement of the Red Satan. It wasn't. They were wondering whether they should teach silent intimidation to their cubs after Naruto's current display, or was it too early? Not that anyone knew that, of course, and instead assuming discussion on the current subject matter. Haku nor Naruto had shown any reaction either, not even glancing to one another, but most assumed internal deliberation. Which was only true to Haku, but it was also not on topic. Rather, she was contemplating their winter wedding, because obviously she and Naruto are getting married, right? Yes, she hasn't asked him yet. Yes, technically they aren't even dating, let alone engage, but it's basically a foregone conclusion already, so planning must be done thoroughly. Naruto and his 10 tenants were literally waiting for the other shoe to drop, kunai to fly, or paper bomb to ignite. Honestly, this was so damn transparent it was boring. Dietrich's sweat dropped at the casualness of the others' casual acceptance of hidden agendas, as if, oh right. World full of ninja assassins. Backstabbing was currency, shadowplay was like breathing, and double crosses commonplace. Kinda makes this all rather mundane and routine for them, the Red Dragon mused. A reasonable proposal. Zekrom stated firmly, accepting Sirzek's counterplay to this boy's rather innocuous threat. Not one adult in the room relaxed from his seemingly compliant acceptance from one of the slyest devils to be born. Of course, they were all right as the leader of the new Devil Faction's council continued. Though, implementation will require trust. His purple eyes were on the blonde sage directly, but his attention flickered to the dark-haired Yukiheim at his side briefly. Unfortunately for Zekrom, that was sensed as he did finish, as he added. It would be prudent for one of these sages to remain within the underworld, to observe, to ensure these safeguards are properly upheld. His voice was neutral, meticulously so, his tone diplomatically clean as he finished. After all, if trust is to be mutual, then surely oversight should also be. Internally, Sirzek grit his teeth at Zekrom's play. Yes, at the meeting, he had shown interest in the sage known as Miyuki, but didn't think he would play it now like this. Worse still, if he counters it openly, then his own proposal would suffer too, and the growing rift within the faction exacerbates. Serafal did not show anything on her face, but internally she was facepalming so damn hard it was surely heard externally. Did he just? He did. He actually did. Unbeknownst to Serafal, every single devil of the new Devil Faction, who understood the underlying message, so everyone but Ichiei, had mirrored Serafal's internal deliberation. The Greeks, the Grigori, Heaven, nor the Shinto bothered to look at the sages at all, and instead just let out tired sighs of various degrees. The Hindu pantheon, however, just shook their heads in disappointment of the devil's positioning in this matter. They had only really come to observe these sages up close, more so the one going by the name of Narian, and make their own informed decision regarding his continued existence in their world. However, it seems that their concerns were ill-warranted, despite the wholesale slaughter of the hero faction a few days prior by the one known as Narian. On the other hand, this also provides them with a more thorough way to understand and expand their knowledge on these, potentially truly neutral allies in the future. Nurarihyun and Magari both narrowed their eyes on the Devil Faction, indignations and outrage equally potent. The nerve of suggesting a sage serve them, the forces of evil, was insulting at the very fundamental level. Yusaka and Sei's tales were fluffed, agitated, and composure breaking at the sheer audacity to even suggest such a thing. Of all those who reacted, and those who expected a reaction, Haku did not so much as twitch at the implications of the presented condition. Despite wanting to freeze them all solid and shatter them for this blatant territorial infringement, she is married to Naruto alone. Even if by her will alone, she doesn't, as the reason was elegant in its simplicity. She was one of Naruto's most precious people, thus, she was safe. The devils, on the other hand, not so much. After an exceedingly long and obscenely potent stretch of silence, Naruto took in a slow, heavy inhale of air. Then exhaled it slow, hard, and with a sigh of someone who almost expected something more. Then, and only then, did the Nindame Sage of Six Paths look to the devils. Naruto then stated, "You know, once, I would have pleaded, fought you, negotiated, bargained for something better. I naively believed that everyone deserves that chance." He chuckled softly, almost wistfully, a calm smile that never reached his eyes upon his visage before he continued. I do genuinely believe everyone can do better. It was part of who I was back then. Then the smile fades. Years of war and hell reapplied as his cold blue eyes bleed to a vibrant orange. The slit slowly creeping narrow. Naruto spoke with a chilling detachment. However, in recent times I have come to learn, the hard way, that not everyone can be saved. A beat of silence, before he continued, almost offhandedly, and not everyone should be. Taking a moment to inhale, Naruto added. This, naturally, brings me more in line with the other sages, both the ones here and those not, and so, I am perfectly within my rights to withdraw the restraint I have granted you up until this moment. His eyes hardened as he spoke almost gently. Threatening me was already a mistake. Threatening my people. A striking cold entered those already dangerous orange-slit eyes as he finished. That crosses a line no one survives. Chuckling, Zekrom replied casually. You are powerful, Menma, I admit. However, you seem to have underestimated us and our allies. Naruto's return chuckles were childishly bubbly, his amusement thick as he offered. Is that right? In that case, bring them. The air itself seemed to vacate the shrine as everyone's eyes widened in alarm, shock, or disbelief. The sages, though, had never looked so serious. Scoffing, Zekrom retorted, voice measured. As expected of a child with too much power. You think we will be intimidated by? He fell silent the moment Naruto stands up, leaning forward on his fists pressed against the table as he lost everything but his seriousness. These last few weeks I have been thoroughly briefed on your so-called power. Your statement has only reinforced what I took at face value from your opponents. His eyes narrowed, voice as empty as the void. So, Slaver-san, bring your army. Then bring everything you have. A deliberate pause before Naruto finished. It won't be enough, I assure you. But, it makes this removal of this corrupt structure of yours far easier to manage. Azazel whistled. Damn. Kid just called out a whole faction. And the tension spikes exponentially due to it, to the point some wondered if the seeding would fail. Narian, that was not our intent. Searsex stated as he jumped to his feet. Naruto regarding him as the Satan pressed. No one here is seeking to threaten those under your protection. A glance to Zekrom, briefly, before he added. The proposal was poorly framed. An unfortunate interpretation. Zekrom added, unblinking and with a level voice as he stared back at the standing sage. Though, a telling one, if a mere suggestion of mutual oversight is perceived as a threat. That's not what we meant at all. Seraphal interjected, voice softer than earlier. A brief moment of hesitation before she added. We are not trying to take anyone from you. Though even her gaze flicked briefly toward Haku, then back on the blonde as she whispered, we just. However, Zekrom cut in smoothly, causing the Leviathan seatholder to bite her tongue as she really wanted to strangle him right now. It would seem that trust was never present to begin with, which raises the question. Despite Searsex's stare to stand down, Seraphal's glare, he still fielded. On what foundation, exactly, this cooperation is meant to stand? His voice simmered low, but Naruto answered that question for more than just himself, it would appear. You seem to assume your faction had any capital in this room, Slaver-san. The silence grew thicker, gained weight while it blanketed the room. Naruto continued, voice as if drawing a blade. Every single faction represented here has suffered at your hands. This is very much a cooperation between us. You, on the other hand, have yet to earn your place here. Even the young devils inhaled sharply at that, looking around the room to see none even hinting at moving to interrupt. With narrowed eyes, power building slowly, Naruto finished. Now, you try and use politics to get out of this. No, I'm done running. I'm done negotiating. This problem ends. Today. The tension was thick enough to dine on. Yet, as stated, no one moved to defuse the situation. Despite their sharp eyes, none of the Shinto Trinity looked like they planned to interrupt and were still, silently observing the room as a whole. The smiles on Nurarihyun and Megari were faint, but very dangerous. They were likely glad someone finally said it plainly. Yasaka nor Sei were bristling like before, both similarly still while observing the interactions. They were not so secretly in alignment with the sage as it was obvious the new devil faction had overreached against a foe they had failed to comprehend. Cold was an adept description of Artemis' gaze on Zekrom, though she was also unsurprised at the devil's predictable greed. Demeter was contemplative, though her decision to offer Narian the position of champion was still on the table. Michael had his eyes closed, quietly exhaling as things seemed to have spiraled out of control rather violently. Although he agreed with Narian's principles, this direction is not what he had hoped for. The possibility for instability has grown exponentially, and no doubt concerns for the future of heaven with it. Gabriel was concerned about many things, none of them tactical. Sariel, however, was watching the Sage of Life, her effective counterpart in most ways, and revising the threat level he was displaying at present. Challenging an entire faction, especially one as militarily developed as the new Devil faction, was brazen and possibly suicidal. However, his confidence suggests he is not bluffing. Azazel's grin had faded slightly but gained more of a curious edge to it. This development is both getting good, but also bad at the same time. Benamune was revising her threat assessments during this entire discussion, and quite frankly, if she was a betting woman, Narian's confidence suggests that he genuinely believes he can and will be victorious, and thus, her hypothetical money is on him. Kateria had never been this delighted before, her smiling was telling, and her silence told of her entertainment during this escalation. Best part? She had not done a thing. Indra, Shiva, and Sarasvati just observed both parties. They knew the devils would likely overextend. Likely misread these sages. Thus, this outcome is all but assured. Shiva, especially, seemed far more aligned with the sage's mindset and understanding, though remained silent for now. Sarasvati had not taken her powerful eyes off the sage known as Narian, almost as if she can see what, she suspects, the others can't yet. But, if her predictions hold true, then they were about to. Sears was stuck standing, his expression strained as he realized he was losing the room, if he had not lost it already, to the sage's argument and presence. He was trying to figure out a way to not start a war with people who had gone toe-to-toe with him with his injured sister this close. He was not alone as Seraphal's gaze flowed from Narian and Zekrom, trying to figure out how things got this bad. It was not supposed to go like this. Zekrom had finally locked in on this sage directly now, fully, and realized they have moved well beyond negotiations and cunning directly to active threat. Politically, they're cornered. Physically, possibly. Yet, above all else, he now understands a singular truth. This is where the sages stand. Yeah, this was harder to get back into than I realized. Rewoed it a half-dozen times since Friday night, Saturday morning, re-listening and reading all the notes, and everything again while resisting the urge to completely rework the series from the beginning. Finish first, rework everything afterwards. I know peoples were somewhat annoyed with the constant shifting of names, and I have reeled it back to only the necessary for context on character mindset. Admittedly, I was having a lot of fun in that one workshop scene and went overboard with it, slightly. Also, for the sword and sword practitioners, that scene of Naruto and Kiba talking was my attempt at keeping it simple, as the two don't actually speak the same language or have the same terminology between them. Kiba is more European swords, while Naruto is elemental nations. That I treat as ancient Japanese adjacent. Naruto has very limited, if any, knowledge on European blades and was going off observation at most. It won't be just katana slash and long sword smash. It was literally that one scene alone. Please relax, as I am actively researching that stuff as it comes up, and hope not to do your sport and/or hobby a disservice. I tried to fix the flatness of the initial scene several times. This was the best I could come up with, as there was a minor time jump as I am done with the whole playing around at the shrine thing. Next up is the penultimate plot point, followed by the thing everyone has been asking for and the return. Elemental nations. Land of eddies. Beachside steps on the sand beneath the night sky caused the former cage no concern as he stared up at the endless darkness interspersed with the flickering of distant stars, barely visible with the intensity of the moon's glow as of late. Soon, the second redhead stopped beside him and spoke. "Are you ready for this, Gaara-chan?" Not even bothering to react to the name-calling, Gaara responded without moving his gaze. "Yes, Kushina-san." Kushina hummed softly, listening to the leaping waves, larger than normal these days, and the calm winds filled with the ocean spray. After a minute of this, Gaara posed. "They know we're coming." "That they do," Kushina confirmed, arms folded behind her back, crimson hair flowing in the shifting air currents. Gaara added, "I wonder if this is how he felt." A pause as another wave crashes down on the sand before them, before he continued. "Fighting with those you once considered your own." With a long sigh, Kushina replied, "I know my Sochi suffered and struggled with it for a long time." He pleaded at first, then tried to bargain. But, when his own precious people were used against him. Another wave crashed down as they both understood the torment of their joint acquaintance. Gaara spoke next, flat as can be. "Where he is now, he's doing well." With a playful grin of Uzumaki intent, Kushina chuckled lowly as she informed. "Oh, he's getting there." Finally looking over to the woman who birthed his first friend, Gaara asked, "Getting there?" Kushina nodded, grinning still as she explained. "Last I heard, he was kicking the ass of some forest goddess and her priestesses, whilst inside a forest." With a deadpan, Gaara replied flatly, "That, unfortunately, sounds accurate." Another wave crashed down, but Kushina giggle cut through the sound before she added with a chirp. "He's also, apparently, beaten several world leaders, outrun special forces, escaped recovery squads, and, just before I came here, beat a bunch of terrorists on a beach not unlike this one." Gaara let out a long, suffering sigh as the Uzumaki cackled up a storm in pride and mischief. It was now very clear where his friend got his eccentricity from. Knowing the blonde, he's probably about to start a fight for the good of someone else, or because someone disrespected something he cherishes. Probably. Kushina abruptly stopped her pride-loaded, menacing cackle and remembered something she was quick to voice. "Oh, actually, it was Sochi's birthday not too long ago." Gaara blinked at that swift switch of topic, but before he could gather his senses, Kushina continued after a softer smile took over her face. "But, I have the perfect gift for him." "Us? No," Kushina replied softly, shaking her head before looking to the redhead best friend of her son. She smiled. "A scarf I knitted back when I was still alive and carrying him. It should be in storage back in the leaf." Gaara thought on that, before he nodded and added, "Then, I should have to look around for my own gift." Kushina waved him off, then stated, "The fact that you are jumping worlds to be at his side is the minimum," Gaara claimed sternly, causing her amethyst eyes to snap to him. He unfolded his arms as he stepped forward, towards the ocean, and allowed his hands to clasp behind his back as he explained. "The world turned on him and when it did, we were left aside." Kushina didn't interrupt, though she had a smile as the normally short man bore his words to this night. Gaara continued. "We failed to protect him, yet he still protected us. I will not fail my first friend, my brothers, either of them, again. Supporting him is the minimum we should be ready to do. He has carried this weight too long. Been our light in the consuming darkness." He turned back and faced the Uzumaki matriarch, his fist clenched ahead of him as he declared, "It is now our turn to do the impossible." The waves crashed down behind him as if on cue, and Kushina's smile was as wide as her son's when she replied, "Thank you, Gaara no Sabaku, for being my Sochi's friend." Gaara simply nodded, then looked at the moon above again. It was larger now than any time before but remained his comfort past time. As the still larger waves crashed upon the sand at his feet with their increased intensity of late, Kushina added, almost teasingly, "Are you sure you're not Uzumaki?" Barely maintaining his character-defining deadpan, Gaara offered back flatly, I am sure. Then a moment of pause, Kushina chuckling as she turned back to head towards their camp when he added, "But it would not matter anyway. He is still my brother." Earth. Neutral Shrine. 6-Path Pact Conference at the same time. The tension was thick enough to dine on. Yet, as stated, no one moved to defuse the situation. However, this ended with Searsx standing. Then he stated, "That is premature. I am sure we can come to A." The Satan was interrupted as, for some reason that only the cosmos was aware of, Naruto abruptly sneezed into his arm and Haku immediately handed him a tissue, though it was clear he was just as confused as everyone else as to why he just sneezed. The chance of him gaining an illness is borderline impossible. Within his mind, Saiken confirmed. No rogue viruses, bacterium, or biological hazards detected. You are clean, Naruto-kun. Kurama growled, a shudder down his spine and central tail. Then why'd I feel something incredibly dangerous approaching in the near future? The others all shared looks, though Shukaku's grin was unusual, even for him, as he muttered. My old host comes to mind, for some reason. Externally, Naruto's still orange fox eyes shift back to the devils as he waved them off. Go, bring your army. Searsx paused a moment, as did Seraphol. However, Zekrum's eyes narrowed so minutely, most would not have noticed. Seeing this, Naruto focused solely on him as his voice dropped, quiet, deadly. Did you honestly think we wouldn't notice? All eyes shift from the standing sage to the devil counselor. Even the other devils looked to him. Aoi added as cold as death. 10,321 devils. Just beyond the northeastern perimeter. The air shifted, the room quietly detonated as chairs scraped, only 3, drawing eyes to the other sages now standing beside the standing Narian, who stated calmly, deathly, bring them. Amaterasu slammed her tesson shut, then asked, you mean, we're sages? Aoi confirmed, eyes locked on the devils with cold indifference. We felt them the moment they stepped onto this land. Zekrom. Searsx hissed sharply, a clear step above warning, and clear breach of something internal, but the counselor said nothing. Not even when Seraphol lost composure as she muttered in genuine disbelief, you did what? The completely lack of panic was unusual. However, the leader of the new Devil Faction Council noted. Eventually, Zekrom offered calmly, unapologetically. A precaution. Several pressure spikes from around the room. Michael was the first to state it openly. This was not agreed upon. With his grin sharpening, Azazel muttered, hey, so, this was a setup. Neither the Yukai nor Greeks reacted outwardly, though all three clearly were not pleased. The Hindu also seemed unfazed and maintained their observations of the room, though Sarasvati noted the sage known as Narian's eyes flickered to the shadows behind the 2 Greek goddesses briefly. Narrowing his eyes, that gleam in predatory intent, Naruto stated again, so go on. The devils all looked to him, as nerves silently raising, as he finished, a faint, humorless smile forming. Bring your army. Lead them. And we. Gesturing to himself, then to his fellow sages at his side, Naruto continued, we'll answer your little precaution. Then his smile sharpened, becoming something akin to predatory slipping through as he finished. Or are you too afraid to stand behind your words? The silence was borderline lethal at the callout by the sage now confronting the new Devil Faction, that was clearly split on both their response and reactions. Kateria was having the best time of her long life and really wished she had popcorn right now. Kuroka's tails were swaying so much, the air currents were shifting due to it. Yet, at the center of all this attention, Zekrom Bael calmly, elegantly stood up and took his time to do so while staring at the orange-slit eyes of this child, while he informed. How unfortunate. It is clear that you do not practice what you preach. A mere precaution for our safety twisted to be something unreasonable. A few brows raised, but before Searsx could say anything, he continued smooth as silk. However, you claim we have made a mistake. Then we are not alone as you have done so, but far grander. You mistake our openness for weakness. Trample our pride to go to reaction. Nodding once, not a concession or acknowledgement but of understanding, Zekrom stated. Very well, Menma Maelstrom. We shall play your game. We shall see the consequences of your actions. We shall see what you have wrought this day. His smile was not warm as he finished. And when the sun sets, you will be returned to the underworld and placed in prison until you finish your sentences, in accordance with our laws. Turning about, head held high, Zekrom strode with purpose towards the transportation circle and left the room speechless at his confidence, at the certainty he carried. Yet, when eyes returned to the blonde sage, the grin he wore was anything but placating or comforting. Seeing no way out of this right now, Sirzex turned back to his sister and stated, Rias, you and your peerage are to go with Grafia back to the underworld and... Snorting, drawing attention to himself, Naruto quipped with a glare at the Red Satan. The fact you think they are in danger here, on neutral ground, talks much about your own character than it does ours, Slaver-san. Sirzex went to interject, but Izuna waved him off. They're children. That have already suffered at your hands, men. Narian. Serafal cut in, pointing at Naruto, whose eyes sharpened. Then he retorted. They enslaved and attempted my subjugation. I maimed, not killed. He stared at the two reigning Satans, his orange eyes glowing with barely restrained power. As long as they remain here and not commit to combat, then they remain as non-combatants. With the others here, they can ensure that remains so. Sirzex glanced around and Michael offered immediately, they will be safe here. As Narian stated. Azazel spoke next, then looked to the young devils and added, as long as they make no attempt to aid you, they're safe here. Reluctantly, Sirzex nodded once, before glancing back at the four sages and his expression hardened. I ask you to reconsider this. With those parting words, he turned towards the transfer circle etched into the reception room. Serafal glanced back and then bowed. Please, reconsider this. No, Naruto stated firmly, unflinchingly, and without hesitation at all. Nodding, Serafal joined Sirzex as they both transported away to wherever Zekrom left too. Silence remained for a moment, before Naruto let out a tight breath, his eyes drifting back to the shadows behind Demeter and Artemis again. This time others followed his gaze, with Sarasvati and Sariel noticing something amiss immediately. Naruto, Haku, Aoi, and Izuna were already moving towards the door when Yasaka snapped up and called out, Wait, Narian. They had already left, and the room scrambled after them outside. However, what they found when they got there caused the Uchiai to gasp, Yasaka included, as they took in the sight of the sages preparing for battle. Inzuna revealed samurai-esque armor, similar to Sasanu in the sense it covered his left side alone, shoulder, arm, chest, legs and boots, and it looked all like molten, flowing flame captured in solid steel. He drew his blade briefly, inspecting it before sheathing it once more. Aoi's form caused the fallen angels to gain a flash of recognition, then pure existential fear as they remember her from the Great War era now that she was in her combat armor. What appeared to be solid rock covered critical areas yet did not restrict her movement, nor reach her head. With an intricately carved wooden staff in arm and smirk on full, she waved daintily back at the pale Azazel and Benamun, seemingly remembering that encounter long ago and enjoying their reaction immensely. Haku simply placed her mask upon her face while the wind briefly parted her haori to reveal senbon holders, numerous satchels, and no armor. She didn't need it. As for Naruto, he was fitting Caliburn onto his waist, opposite his Uzumaki Shinto katana from its hidden spot on his back. Then, he turned back to the crowd, his eyes locked on Yasaka with a smirk. Yasaka for some reason locked onto him just as sharply, everything else falling away as a question she, and plenty of her fellows, had wondered about the sage as finally being answered. As suddenly, from his blonde hair slowly poked up two ears that were very clearly fox in nature. Canines lengthened, it did not take an idiot to realize why. But what caused breathing to become optional was the slowly emerging number of golden tails. One flowed out from beneath his scarlet haori. Eyes widened, Breaths caught and the silence became a member of the crowd. Then 2 more appeared. 3 more after that. Sei grabbed Yusaka's arm, unnaturally hard and without meaning to, as her own eyes were fixated on the answer to their earlier thoughts regarding the sage was finally being answered. If he had a form that resembled them, and now, she didn't really know how to process it. Before the next blink, the last 3 were already out. 9. Long, far longer than Yukai Kitsune, and swaying in the wind while orange stared into gold. The wind caressed them, they flowed with it, and the fur, clearly soft, moved with it, showing that this was very real, very biological. Smirking, Naruto turned away from the mesmerized crowd, and they all locked onto his form as he finished. "We got this." As he strode forward, the air abruptly became supercharged and overflowing with life as the golden cloak form shimmered into view and flowing down his tails. Using his extended canines, Naruto bit both his thumbs while the wind suddenly picked up and his golden cloak flowed in it, revealing his tanto on his lower back, 2 legendary swords on his hips, and kunai pouches filled with 3-pronged kunai. When it died down, 9 truth-seeking orbs appeared immediately. Moments later, his shikuho materialized and he spread his blooded thumbs across it as he grasped it with both hands, then spinning it once. The amount of nature energy he abruptly called upon startled everyone who could sense it, slack jaws from a few, but Naruto was more focused on the next part to notice. In his head, Kurama chuckled as he declared, "Do it, Naruto." Reveal of the 9 grinning, Naruto slammed his shikuho into the dirt and called out, "Sage art, manifestation, children of the first sage." The second the staff cracked the ground, it was as if reality had fractured too, for several long moments. A heavy, unnatural pressure filled the area, the clouds churned unevenly, knees buckled under the density of something they could not quite comprehend as many had the instinct to run. Unfortunately, this power prevented such notions from becoming reality. Thick smoke, loaded with chakra of nature, blocked views of whatever came through and even the gods struggled to recognize what was happening at current as it seems. That even the planet itself was now paying attention. Then it happened. The cloud recoiled upon the vibrations of echoes that then preceded a roar that no doubt shook the heavens themselves, as if reality was still lagging behind the action, the ground almost rejecting what was happening as it shook from the absorption of the act. The smoke did not clear, but rather was torn apart, as if something, many somethings, too large had forced its way onto the space that could not contain it. This finally revealed a secret few knew, none suspected, and effectively closed the debate. This was no longer, can he win? But rather, this isn't a battle, is it? And everyone knew it. Because before them now stood 9 beats of nature the world seems to be accommodating rather than they simply existing. A sandy tanuki. Blue flames in the form of a 2-tailed cat. A turtle with 3 tails. An orange ape with 4 tails. A white horse with 5 tails. A grayish-white slug with 6 tails. A beetle of some kind with 6 wings and a stinger. An octopus bull hybrid with 8 tails. In the center, was the final one with 9 long tails and sage atop its head, was an unknown 9-tailed fox with said tails fanned out. All of them were larger than any yukai true form, towering between 30 and 35 meters tall, chakra dense enough to taste, and power unrecognizable. Izuna swallowed nervously, sweat pouring down his face as he stuttered. The tailed beasts, here? How? Aoi turned on him immediately, eyes flaring with power, a hint of fear, and a desire to understand what she was seeing and sensing. You know them. Izuna could only nod once, before Haku cut in. They're allies. Aoi turned on her just as quick, but the Yukiheim continued. They're here as our reinforcements. Everything else will be explained later. They better be. Aoi snipped, not liking being kept in the dark about something like this, and no doubt the others were panicking beyond measure or comprehension. However, she caught movement as Naruto had leapt off the giant kitsune's head and slammed his shikuho down again. Nature energy surged controlled into him when he then called out. Sage art. Pact manifestation. Sekiryu. Lines of script. Unknown. Unseen by this world prior. Race across the ground in all directions before interlocking and glowing from black to bright crimson. Suddenly, a thick eruption of smoke and chakra blanketed the area. The confusion was short-lived as the ground trembled as claws hit it, the sky darkened briefly, and abruptly a roar echoed off the sky announcing the return to the physical world in his greatness. The cloud of smoke dismissed by the just-finished forming dragon giant wings revealing the armored carapace of the Red Dragon Emperor, the Welsh dragon Diedrich, matching the height of the creatures, and standing with them. Standing atop the dragon's head, Naruto, with his shakuho gripped in his right hand, truth-seeking balls at his back, the wind flowed past and flapped his haori displaying the rest of his weapons, his 9 tails swaying with them. He, unintentionally, looked majestic, if not mythic, as even his hair flowed in the breeze of the moment. The crowd had slacked jaws, blank minds, and dry throats as now a new question had formed. Is this what happens when restraint is removed? Abruptly, the mystery in mythical nature was sliced through when the blue flame made Cat stepped forward and called, "Let's tag team, Kitten-chan." All eyes followed to see Kuroka, annoyed, brow twitching, and tails slashing as she quipped back, "NYA, I have you know I am a fully developed, fine feline, nya." Though she grinned before bursting forward. Much to the audience's surprise, the large cat's form dropped and shrunk before a remarkably familiar form appeared. A shorter 5'5" woman with vibrant blue, shoulder-length hair with 2 black ears poking up and 2 blue tails, with a type of pattern in black swaying at her back. She had pale skin and a really cute face and a bigger than Kuroka's chest and a cheeky smirk upon her lips, very distinctive mix-matched eyes, one a pale yellow and the other a deep green. She landed just as Kuroka reached her and the two high-five, showing they were familiar with each other somehow meaning. Kuroka knew about them all this time. Not only that, that woman was the one Narian turned into sometimes. Doesn't that mean that he didn't transform, but replaced himself with? Then, is he really actually a kitsune? Furthermore, doesn't this mean these creatures were among them all along? Yasaka muttered. This isn't a battle, but a correction. Amaterasu spoke next, from behind her and startling the Kyoto Kyuubi. He is taking this seriously, it seems. Heaven, Grigori, the Hindu, the Greeks, and the remaining devils all turn on the Shinto Trinity and then noticed their calm postures. Sasunu chuckled lowly, grinning up at the 9 large beasts. Did not actually expect to see them so soon. He's taking this seriously. A brief pause of contemplation before he added, or flexing his chakra, dunno which. Azazel near enough screams. You knew? Of course. Amaterasu claimed calmly, Tessin open and covering her mouth now to hide the amusement she felt creep onto her face. Tsukuyomi was just thankful that the sage did not reveal the full forms of the beasts sealed within. He doubts many would stay as calm as this if a near 500-meter tall 9-tailed kitsune was summoned, let alone the similarly large others. Indra turned to the Shinto Trinity and asked sharply, why were we not informed of this matter before now? Amaterasu looked back at him, not backing down from the force he was projecting, and stated firmly, unyieldingly stern. They're under our protection and purview. We had been informed of them prior to this moment. They're no threat to us. Their power suggests otherwise. Shiva commented, not breaking his gaze from the towering masses before him. Yet, he was answered by Sasunu, who countered. If you knew their history, you would have the same understanding we do. They're no threat. Though, he side-eyed them with a grin. Unless, of course, you try to contain them or restrict their freedom. Sasunu's grin widened a fraction, as his arms cross. Sound familiar? Sarasvati stated flatly. They are his driving force. The reason he seeks balance and freedom. They are no threat to us. Not as long as we are no threat to them. Indra regarded both his counsel and that of the Shinto, before looking back at the beings before him, staying silent while he contemplated the larger picture. Rias was gawking at the summons called forth by men, Narian, that now tower above the forest, and were preparing to fight against her brother. Another Kyuubi, far larger and more formidable than even Yusaka of the Yukai faction. That giant blue flame cat from the school wasn't just a little transformation, but a completely separate entity. Then, that one was the one who took her legs, maimed her childhood friend, and had been training with Kuroka during their time in the shrine. Then there was the attack on the hero faction, when Narian gained wings and a stinger. The giant beetle among them was likely the source. Does that mean he's had them hidden inside him like a sacred gear? No, this was something else. Especially since the Welsh dragon is now standing among them in its dragon form, not like that humanoid form from the school or later on. Then, what exactly is this? Was he, Narian, holding back this entire time? If he had, by how much? When that fact clicked, her stunned disbelief sunk, fast, into fear and dread at the fact her older brother is about to face off against 9 massive super Yukai-like beings. And the Red Dragon Emperor. Worst of all, if she does anything, absolutely anything that may be construed as aiding him, she would be liable for directly and be considered a valid target herself. This all means one thing she had never once thought of before. Rias Gremory was scared for her brother's life. She wasn't alone, as Grafia at her side was equally, if not more, concerned and worried about her king and husband's safety. Ichiei was on his knees, the pressure too much to bear for him, but when he finally managed to look up from the ground with the aid of Kiba, his breath caught at the sight of the massive beasts before him. More accurately, Diedrich, out and free, standing among them like he belonged there. Then he noticed Menma standing on his head, looking majestic with all his swords, power, and tails like that Yusaka lady. That can't be legal. Absolutely stronger than most, majestic as fuck, all the cool weapons, ladies for days, and now challenging a whole nation to a fight, with summons he can call upon? That's just unfair. Then, Ichiei noticed the new girl with Kaniko's sister. Blue hair, cat ears, and blue tails at her back. He blinked, then looked back up to see Menma atop Diedrich still, then back at the woman with Kaniko's sister. He sweat dropped, realizing something was wrong here. Kaniko too was watching her sister and that unknown super flaming cat she had seen before. Back at the school, when Menma heard everyone and then transformed into that massive flaming cat. Then during training, this lady came and everyone thought it was a transformation. Now, it seems not to be. Taking a sniff, she can tell that this new cat was powerful enough to make the foxes nervous and that she had no chance. Yet, her sister is friends with. Confusing. Artemis was staring at the beasts with genuine shock and bewilderment at what could only be described as mythical adjacent creatures given form. Things that have not roamed free for eons, now standing before them and under the command of the sage known as Narian. They were no threat. She can sense that clear as day. Even more so as Narian's aura was even more potent than their first encounter. The forest, the local fauna, the planet itself. None of it was threatened by these towering beasts, but rather the opposite. They were all accommodating toward them. It was remarkable. Otherworldly. For the first time in recorded history, Artemis would gladly fight alongside a mortal male. She shook her head, ridding herself of that thought. Narian is no mortal man. He was a sage. An equal to her, perhaps. Fighting at his side would not be a dishonorable act nor decision. After all, he is nature, life even, given form. An avatar almost, perhaps. Artemis was broken from it by her lieutenant hunter, Zoe Nightshade, appearing from the tree line with several other hunters. My lady, enemy to the north. Northeastern approach. I am aware. Artemis returned, causing the returning hunters to pause and take a moment. Then naturally, their eyes land on the towering beasts they had ignored in favor of returning to their lady. Demeter had many thoughts of what she was seeing, but none of them mattered beyond the simple fact that now, more than ever, she wants Narian as her champion. Fighting at his side, a blessing. Having him fight for her, a future requirement. Just being near this aura, this power of his, was insightful and empowering beyond belief. He is life given purpose, guidance, and direction. Never has she seen anything even remotely comparable to this man. As such, she must have him. All these thoughts happened in a few short moments, all while Naruto had finished stabilizing the connections and the various manifestations he had performed. Now, he was working on stabilizing his own chakra levels. Were it not for the increased capacity and control of this fox form, he'd probably be passed out right now. Dropping down, Naruto landed beside the sweating Izuna, the wary Aoi, and the calm Haku, and he asked, "You all ready?" Haku nodded. Izuna looked at him, while Aoi pointed up at the new arrivals. "I expect a full and thorough review of your guests once this is over." Smiling, Naruto nodded briefly, before his eyes hardened and they all locked in focus as they turned to the northeastern direction, towards their enemy. Devil forward command. Perimeter line moments ago. Appearing from the transfer circle, Searsex and Seraphol are confronted by what was revealed to the entire pact. A detachment of 10,321 military devils. A few scattered house banners among them, but the majority were military sigils. This was not something either Satan could openly endorse, nor could they publicly denounce, as no doubt Zekrom had already spun it as a protective precautionary measure to the other houses. This, obviously, means that they would come off as ungrateful for the protection offered and boost Zekrom's own standing. The slime isn't the leader of the council for nothing. Stepping onto the central, raised dais, the two Satans joined Zekrom Biel, who was inspecting the army before him. 10,000 strong. Formations locked in professionally. Magic circles primed. Numerous barriers, from defensive to detection, weather to security, all layered atop each other to ensure they remained hidden, protected, and ready. Clearly, they had no idea how the sages not only detected them, but counted each and every foot soldier, officer, and supporter here despite the vigorous effort to hide and remain inconspicuous. That does not matter now. On the raised platform, Searsex Lucifer stands composed but in stilled silence. He doesn't support this action, however. A fractured government right now would invite more trouble than manageable. He will bide time and wait for the perfect time to end this, pin this undeniably on Zekrom, strip him of his authority, and work towards fixing this situation. Beside him stood Seraphol Leviathan, outwardly relaxed and calm, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. This is a worst-case scenario, but she can probably bring this to a deadlock on both sides. She's faced Menma plenty of times before, so if she goes all out and creates a stalemate, he would be forced back to the negotiating table. Her preferred battlefield. The faster she engages him, the less casualties they'd take. If the army holds off the other sages, keeping them busy, she can strike against the head with Searsex and force the stalemate again. Standing front and center, as important as ever, hands clasped behind his back and perfectly relaxed, was Zekrom Biel. He was watching the army, then the horizon to the southwest and the so-called Six-Path Pact's conference. He will admit, to himself alone, that things had not been ideal. Perhaps a less forceful approach may have yielded better results. A more pragmatic and delayed version to incur favor first, then pressure, indirectly of course, of the Yukiheim's inspection of the agreement. However, this is not a total loss. Not yet. Zekrom had read all the reports of every encounter the rogue rook known as Menma has had since his escape. The school incident with the Gremory and Sea-Tree heiresses was the most telling of them all. His weaknesses were clear as day. Although formidable in one-on-one, small skirmish, and counter-ambush engagements, Menma clearly has trouble in larger-scale conflicts. His confrontation with the hero faction told of this rather plainly. Even if it looked like he handled it, him relying on magic support and close-range combat shows he lacks widespread combat magics. That is another thing. Seraphol's initial report of her encounter with Menma highlighted two things. 1. He is a chakra user. 2. He struggles against ice magic. As a chakra user, Menma's few ranged attacks will struggle against the more advanced and regimented magics of military devils, especially when layered atop one another. With Seraphal's prestigious capabilities in ice magic as a part of the formation, the rogue rook will be pressed harder than before while also fending off a competent, first-rate military force. With Sears X and himself, their combined destruction magics will keep the other sages busy, along with a few squads, long enough to subdue the rogue, before systematically bringing down each sage and solidifying the control over them. With confidence, Zekrum's blank face just nodded once, certain they could pull this off. The first report came in. A commander steps forward and reported, "No movement beyond the shrine perimeter." He paused, before he added, "Beside the perimeter forces withdrawing back to the shrine." Another commander steps forward, saluting before she reported, "Barrier grid stable. Long-range detection is active." Zekrum nods once, though the tiniest bit of satisfaction appeared on his lips as many officers too gained fuller ones, that spread through the ranks swiftly. They had all heard about the feats of the rogue rook, expected resistance, prepared countermeasures. Yet, at the time of truth, nothing. Yet, before Zekrum could give new orders, the wind shifted wrong. It was subtle, unnoticed by most, but the senior officers all stopped. Sears X and Seraphal narrowed their eyes along with Zekrum. Then a sensory-type devil stiffened and muttered, "Sir." Swallowing hard, he stammered, "There's, pressure." He went ignored as all eyes were on the sky, the clouds churning. Not drift, not escape, churn. Almost as if something beneath them is pulling the sky inward. Then reality seemed to shift, splinter almost, and a pressure, unnaturally dense and wrong, descended upon the gathering. Many stumbled, the formation slipping from their perfect ranks, and knees trembled under the weight. Immediately, they all feel it. The terrain around them rippled, as if something had struck a pond and the tremor had only just reached them. The layered barriers flickered and several magic circles destabilize instantly. One commander shouts, "Stabilize formations." Another called out, "Reinforce the grid." Zekrum's eyes narrowed, then muttered lowly, "They've begun." Then the clouds seemed to rebound, or recoil, from the direction of the shrine, vacating the area entirely and in one go. Yet, the horizon in the direction of the shrine was covered in smoke, thick and blanketing. 9 pillars of smoke, large, dense, unnaturally heavy, forcing their way upwards. A silence loaded with anticipation and fear settled in for a long time, but none at all. Then it happened. A cacophony of roars like no other, as if reality was still trying to explain itself, rang out and ears were covered in attempt to remain sane and composed. Among the devil ranks, some were forced to knees, others clutched their chests, and one even just outright collapsed. Then the smoke was dismissed, revealing 9 large beasts with various number of tails, much like yokai, but on a far grander scale with power to match. Seraphal's breath hitched first, as she barely whispered, "What is that?" Searsex was also at a loss for words, his eyes fixated on the 9 beasts as he contemplated what this could mean. "Yukai," Zekrum stated flatly, his feigned understanding of the situation calming and not seen through by those he commands. He added, "They're manageable. All we have to do." He was cut off when another shockwave struck, the ground trembled, and the sudden plume of smoke was removed by the ear-piercing, hair-standing roar of the Red Dragon Emperor himself, and in his fully armored, red-scaled, winged glory beside the Yukai beasts. A roar of absolute, deep domination that was unquestionable. Silence fell across the forward command post at this discovery. The Red Dragon was supposed to be sealed within the gear. Yes, the sage confiscated the soul, but that did not mean it was supposed to have a body again, yet. It seems the sage had granted it one. Several soldiers begin to break, others staring in pure, unadulterated disbelief or horror. One muttered softly, lowly, too quietly and too honestly, we can't fight that." "Hold formation," a commander ordered, though the attempt to hide his own unease was commendable and they all knew. Another ordered, "Do not break ranks." Yet, even on the central command dais, Zekrom could feel the unease growing beneath him while he watches, calculates, and re-evaluates the situation. He had began discarding his previous assumptions one after the next, his presumed understanding outdated and clearly wrong. Eventually, even he muttered, quietly, "This was never about numbers." "No," Searsex responded, soft, equally quiet and gravely. After a moment, he added, "It's a demonstration. And we are not the audience, but," Seraphol whispered, barely audible even as she too stared at the 9 beasts as one had seemingly shrunken down and vanished beneath the trees. The restlessness of the gathered forces continued to grow, the field of battle no longer stable within their sphere of influence. Not physically, but structurally. They still had their formations standing, the barriers holding despite flickering, but the army. Morale plummeted. They can already feel it. That instinctive, primal rejection. The murmuring increased, spreading through the ranks. Not disobedience yet, but if someone did not act soon, it would only be a matter of time before it did. Taking a measured, unhurried, deliberate step forward, head held high, pride oozing from every pore, Zekrom spoke with absolute certainty. "Hold your positions." His voice carried, despite not being loud, and cut through the noise as it was supposed to. Several officers straightened immediately, their troops a moment later as training reasserted itself. Adding a more comfortable lens to the situation, instead of outright lying, Zekrom then announced, "You are witnessing summoned entities of unknown classification." His eyes lift back to the towering beasts, their presence overpowering even at this distance, before he added, "They're not invincible." More backs straightened at that possibility. It wasn't an outright lie, but a necessary one carefully wrapped up in that one word, possibility. Searsex nor Seraphol interrupted the older man as he stabilized morale by controlling the interpretation of events. Though, their gazes sharpened as now their own roles had similarly been redefined. "Maintain formation integrity," Zekrom ordered firmly, now in a more tactical mindset and decision-making finished. He pressed. "Do not engage independently. Await coordinated command." Then the distant Diedrich took a step forward, now in line with the others. The ground trembled again, heavier and closer this time. Several soldiers on the front line flinched, a handful taking a step back. "Eyes forward." Zekrom ordered sharply, immediately, and with no hesitation. He added for good measure, "If you break formation, you die alone." That hit harder and reinforced the structured military units before him, now firming back up and back into something resembling a military response. Yet, unbeknownst to everyone, Zekrom had realized something very simple. This is not a winnable engagement. Not like this, not against that. His gaze traveled over the 8 Yukai and 1 Dragon Emperor, barely catching the single figure dropping off the red-scaled head. Likely Menma. It is clear this was a demonstration, and they had walked into it under the belief they were in control. They haven't been. Not since the beginning. He had simply not corrected them until now. How insidious. Inhaling once, slow and controlled, Zekrom slowly raised a hand and gaining universal attention. All units. Every devil was listening intently. Though, none suspected the next words from his mouth. Prepare for controlled withdrawal. Breaths halted, though both Satans glanced to him, surprised. A senior commander turned sharply, then asked, "Lord Beale." Never had anyone suspected to hear such a dangerous word. Retreat. Withdrawal. While their enemies lay in front of them. What kind of unthinkable madness? Yet, Zekrom cut him off. This is not a retreat. His voice was cold, meticulously composed and precise. This is a recalibration of our engagement parameters. Searsex lets out a long breath. This was clearly a preservation measure. This was good. They may lose some capital, politically, even militarily, but they won't have lost anything they can't replace. Even better, by conceding like this it shows the other factions that they chose not to fight and chose restraint instead of ego. Seraphol exhaled softly too, now also far more relaxed as this reintroduces negotiations as an option. She can work with that. Zekrom then raised his voice, forward beyond his own forces and toward the force now opposing his own. This display is noted. It was measured carefully and chosen carefully, he then added, however. A slight pause, no doubt to signal something that was neither defiance or submission. Zekrom finished. Demonstrations do not constitute victory. Now, this was a dangerous gamble, yes, but now that he has initiated withdrawal, any further action against them is politically radioactive. Even if right now, any escalation would likely be catastrophic to them. Yet Zekrom remained stationary and watchful. No defensive stance, no attack order, just present. Below, the military forces of the new Devil faction begin to shift slowly into withdrawal patterns. As the withdrawal continues to gain speed, Zekrom calculates that the loss of face was minimal. Their forces have been preserved. The narrative was still recoverable, and no doubt Satan Leviathan is already planning for its spin. Yet, something caught his attention and subsequently the attention of every devil on the field. The figure of Menma landing atop the giant nine-tailed fox, his own 9 tails swaying in the wind as he stands back tall and arms slowly crossing his chest. Every instinct the devils had began to scream in dread. Then, the blonde sage spoke, his voice not raised or strained, but certain. No. Breath hitched, eyes widened, as Searsex suddenly gripped the railing and was about to answer, but the blonde sage continued. Chome. Diedrig. A pause as he gestured lazily to the sky. Claim the skies. Immediately, both the red dragon and large beetle spread wings and launched into the sky, as if they had always owned it, and then suddenly said sky became very hostile towards the devil's notions of flight. Several devils stepped back, especially the specialist airborne units who began muttering and one cried out. Airspace, it's lost. An airborne unit commander muttered. Yet, Menma hadn't stopped giving out orders that seemed to be carried along the wind. Shukaku, keep them here. A squeal of approval and cheer echoed, but then a wave of sand, earth, and wind blasts through the forward devil base, shattering the transfer circles, teleportation magic, and personal teleportation items in one go. The entire area covered by a thin layer of sand that sinks into the earth below, sealing the metaphorical and physical exits. Seraphal gasped. Impossible. Not impossible. Searsex muttered through clenched fists, just unknown to us. A crazed laugh echoed as it reached them. Kai ha 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 ha. Menma's calm voice returned to haunt them a moment later as he ordered further. Oi. Sun. Lock the earth beneath them. A second tremor, a localized earthquake as the ground literally shifted beneath them, then solidified beneath them and lines of lava, or magma, began to ooze around the boundaries. Even the commanders of the devil forces began to panic now. A barrier of unknown origin just locked down space-time all around them. The ground is literally burning around them. A dragon and a beetle occupy the sky. They were contained. And had no way out. Then finally, more words carried along the winds, Menma stated with a calm certainty, everyone else. Hearts dropped. Annihilate them. Menma stated, and the silence that it elicited was all-consuming. There was no roar, just the growing thrum of raising power. The beasts drawing nearer. Panic had left, only cold certainty settled. As hope faded across the forces, they all inevitably looked to their leaders for guidance, for clarity, for orders, for survival. Zekrom could see it all clearly. The beasts' tails rising, their power climbing, and asserting control over their immediate vicinity. Even the shadow of the dragon above flowed over them as it glided high, its companion opposite in a lazy arc. Thus, he stepped forward for his final move to try salvage this. His power raised. Not to attack, but to intervene as he allowed his voice to travel as he spoke. Menma Maelstrom. But he paused, as the blonde sage was already staring back at him with an expression that suggests that negotiations were over and nothing else remained but this. Neutral shrine. Exterior moments before, with a grunt, Naruto stated. Aoi, trust me. You and Son Goku can work together best. Eyeing him up warily, Aoi's bare ears flicked once before the giant ape glanced over, his grin cocky. Son Goku added. You aren't bad, Aoi girl, at molding the earth. Aoi's eyebrow twitched, then pointed her staff at the giant monkey and countered. Not bad, I'll show you not bad when. His metal is the core of your new staff, Naruto stated blandly, and that caused the black bear sage of earth and minerals to pause. When her beady black eyes met his orange, he nodded then added. We can discuss things later, but now trust me when I say you guys will work together well. With a sharp exhale through her nose, Aoi remarked. Fine. Just this once. Naruto nodded, then looked at the arriving Matabi and Kuroka then offered. I take it you both have come to an agreement. Matabi led the smirking, tails coiling briefly behind her and confirmed. For now, at least. 2 cats are better than 1, NYA. Kuroka finished, matching smirk and tail action. Naruto just nodded then looked to Izuna and frowned lightly. Your fire primarily. Before Izuna could confirm, Naruto continued. To be honest, either tag team with me or Aoi. Haku is too fast for you, and the others aren't complimentary with. He paused as his fox ears atop his head pricked up, along with Aoi's black bear, Kuroka's cat, and Matabi's too. A moment later, the Bijuu and sages frowned. Before Izuna could ask, Zekram's voice reached them. This display is noted. Now he looked to the northeast and frowned, his eyes bleeding to read and flames simmering brighter. However, Zekram's voice continued, lacking resolve, but also willingness to concede. Then a brief pause before he finished. Demonstrations do not constitute victory. Kurama snorted, as did Shukaku, Son Goku, Izuna, Aoi, and Kuroka. Haku spoke lowly. He is maintaining strength and position, without conceding anything. Naruto looked over at the delegates. It was clear that this changed things for them, but both the Eastern and Western Yokai factions were clearly displeased at yet another brazen act by the devils, bringing an army into their lands and leaving as they pleased, unchallenged. He himself wants to drive the point home, so this outcome is unacceptable. After all, they played stupid games, now they get front row stupid prizes. With a soft growl that caused everyone to shut up and focus, Naruto turned to Kurama, who was grinning at the focused look on his kid's face before he leapt up and landed atop his head. Standing up calmly, Naruto stated like facts. No. Everything seemed to fall silent at that. Even the devils seemed to halt as the sage folded his arms, eyes fixated on their camp. That single word seemed to drop like a judgment given form, and everything else had just decided to stop. With tails swaying lazily in the wind, Naruto ordered with his hand pointing up. Diedrich. Shomei. Claim the skies. Chuckling lowly, wings spreading, Diedrich announced, with pleasure. Shomei clicked once, then stated, consider it done. Both jettisoned into the sky, taking up overwatch positions in lazily orbits and clear lines of fire with no overlap. Michael stepped forward from the crowd, unsure about this, as he asked. Narian. This is unnecessary. They wish to. No, it's required. Shiva stated factually, drawing the leader of heaven's attention to him as he watched too. The Hindu god explained further. This is both a statement of intent and consequences of their actions. Allowing them permission to leave will only make them more arrogant and foolhardier. Then I hope they have a plan to stop teleportation. Azazel offered, watching things unfold. As if in response to those words, Naruto then ordered. Shukaku, keep them here. The single-tailed tanuki cackled up a storm as he slammed his hands together, giggling. Shukaku squealed. Just my style. A directional burst of chakra rippled through the ground towards the devils, earthy, windy and desert dry in its chaotic energy. Benamune adjusted her glasses, then offered. You seem to have spoken too soon, Azazel-sama. Noted. Azazel remarked dryly. Tsukuyomi offered his thoughts aloud. Such intricate designs and symbols. Fascinating. A few strange looks to the Shinto moon deity, who was clearly staring off into the distance and mentally not present. Sarasvati, however, did offer herself. This is a very different approach to such an ancient art, almost as if a distant relative of our own. Sasanu and Amaterasu shared a glance, brief and unnoticed. Kyhahahahahaha. Shukaku's screeching bellow snapped everyone back to the situation and from their thoughts, though Naruto cut it off with his next order. Aoi! Son! Lock the earth beneath them. In unison, both the four-tailed ape and the black bear Yukai slammed the floor, with hands or staff, and an explosive blast of chakra traveled via subterranean channels that impressed the other. Then both gripped the earth and twisted, causing a slight tremor to reach back to them. When both looked to Naruto, grinning in pride, he nodded to them both before eyes locked forward and ordered, "Everyone else." Claws extended from paws, center of masses lowered, and tails unfurled proudly behind them, all then lowered again as they prepared to end this. Naruto ordered, "Annihilate them." The beasts all rush forward, the sages landing on one or running alongside as they encourage upon the devil camp to the northeast, and yet the ground did not even shatter under their weight or intent. Almost there when a power spike drew attention. Naruto's golden-orange eyes were met by Zekrum's violet when he called out, "Menma Maelstrom." That just pissed the blonde sage off more, but he kept his face blank and calculated the best way to eradicate this problem before him. Thus, he went through hand signs, going through the full set to maximize efficiency due to his current chakra level. Tiger, ox, dog, rabbit, snake, horse, bird, ram, tiger. Naruto held the last sign, then stated, "Kurama, gonna need some fire." With a grin, bright orange flames leaking through his teeth, Kurama replied, "Let's cook." Taking in a breath, Naruto declared, "Wind style, grand breakthrough." Exhaling hard, compressing air, before exploding forward in a focused, hemispheric blast, and was met with Kurama's burning orange flames and collated into an all-consuming vacuum of pure thermic output. A focused tunnel of near-light amber flames, incinerating anything unfortunate enough to pass nearby. This near beam impacted the defensive barriers of the devil camp like a force of nature instead of an attack. The sheer force of impact rocked the ground. The already flickering, faulty magic barriers cracked and flexed, trying desperately not to instantly give way. This was only the first, opening strike, and they were already failing. The scorching, bright orange, near white, flames made no sound against the command post's barriers, yet were incinerating the magic making up the defensive wall all the same, and it was happening faster than they could ever hope to repair. Several of the Devil Army specialists caught alight abruptly somehow, burning alive and screaming, despite supposedly being safe behind it, when their commander yelled in absolute disbelief, "Oh shit." A captain muttered, eyes wide in disbelief, "The barriers, impossible." Serafal. Sirzex barked out, cutting through the hysterics, and just in time as incinerated barriers blew apart like melting glass, but were swiftly replaced by demonic permafrost, with Serafal leading the defense. But even she was struggling, partially revealing her true form to maintain the wall. Yet, it wasn't even 2 seconds later where even her magic began to crack, fast, spider webs coughing high-pressure steam from the ice's own moisture, rapid expansion and state change to gas, each crack in the ice sounding like a guillotine and reminding the soldiers of how close death was. Even as the more and more of the barrier magic devils regrouped and reinforced the Satan's efforts, professionally and immediately, the cracks did not slow completely. It did, however, allow many to realize something terrible. This was only the first, opening attack from one of 4 sages, one of 10 beasts, and they are struggling to defend themselves this much. Someone muttered, "No one would ever know who." This may have been a mistake. Abruptly, the defensive bastion of ice erupted, inward. The blast wave rocked the area, all sound died, and the concussive force sent those nearby flying, debris of dirt and molten ice shards back across the camp and injuring more than a few. Screams and cries of pain now echoing again directly following it, as a weird mist and haze settling over the area. As the joint fire blast died out, the area ahead and directly around the camp reduced to ash and glass. Naruto called out from his place atop Kurama's head, having taken a pair of breaths first. "Son, aoi, isobu." The three perked up as he then instructed, "Barrage and scatter." From the back of the back, Isobu's tails raised as water collected around him before he lifted his head and then released several large blasts of pure water on a parabolic arc, target the camp of devils. From the advancing line, Son Goku slammed a palm into the ground, that instantly turned to molten lava, gripped it and then lifted the now semi-fluid stone before throwing it as if he was playing catch with the devils, the projectile naturally calming apart for a more Fletched-like strike. Aoi watched the four tails and would admit, "Okay, that was cool." Son Goku looked to the small bear, then smirked. As the balls of pure dihydrogen oxide descended upon the forward camp of the devils, an umbrella of ice erupted forward to both disperse the pressure of impact and divert the water away from the camp. At the same time, a large wave of destruction erupted and consumed the flaming darts of rock and rock, reducing them to nothingness in a moment. It seems the devils had started to get into the fight properly. Unfortunately for them, the airborne seven-tailed beetle known as Chome saw the smooth ice umbrella and its deflection of Isobu's water barrage and got inspired. Swooping down closer to the large, towering structure of ice covering the large camp, Chome found himself being fired upon by numerous magics that splashed harmlessly on his exoskeleton, but he managed to do what he intended in spreading small, golden sparkling powder-like particles that drew attention. Naruto saw this and swallowed nervously, before turning to cover his eyes. Kurama too slid to a stop and pulled his tails around to block sight. The other Bijuu did the same thing, along with the sages, after the prompt. Blink. All over the world, eyes turned towards Japan as some kind of second sunrise briefly appeared in the eastern sky and confused many. Back on the front line, Kurama pulled back his tails that were smoking lightly from the intensity of the focusing effect that Umbrella caused in response to his brother's hiding in scale powder jutsu, and allowed Naruto to bear witness to it too. Hiding. Try blinding in scale powder. Whistling, Naruto quipped. That was, unexpectedly effective. For a simple blinding jutsu. Kurama grunts, then stated, "I admit, it may have been inspired." Looking around, Naruto notices that the other Bijuu taking a few moments to recover from the sudden flash tag of their sibling, magnified by the devil defense, and made a decision. Pulling out his Uzumaki Shinto katana and his tanto, Naruto stated, "I'm going in, while they are attempting to recover, back me up." Snorting, Kurama chuckled. "Just let me know when I can unleash a Bijuu Dama." Chuckling himself, Naruto nods. Noted. A lift would be good. Before he leaps up, and one of Kurama's tails appeared to slap him, but Naruto had instead used it as a launching platform to clear the distance between him and the enemy camp in an instant. Devil forward command. Perimeter line. The smell of burnt flesh hung around the torched camp like an unrepentant mist. Tents were ablaze. The air thick, humid, clinging, turning the smoke into a choking fog that dared not lift. The scattered survivors, those that didn't instantly vaporize, a mere fraction of the 10,321 devils, staggered around sightless, their retinas burnt out in less than a heartbeat. Those in armor had it worse. Their exposed skin charred, the metal they once wore with pride now warped and fused to their skin, muscle, and even bone beneath from the intensity of the moment they had survived. Their pride in their family's metal now entombed their continued suffering. There were scattered slag heaps where weapon stashes once stood, the wood flash boiled and split apart, the metal red hot at the minimum. A scream tore through the haze. Raw, animalistic. But it did not last as it cut off when its owner collapsed among the many others. The cracking of the ash-covered ground signaled their resting state. A state they will never alter again. The ice shield above did not shatter the light. It caught it, reflected it, fed it back onto itself until the space beneath became a sealed furnace of blinding radiance. All of it in a single instant. Coughing and sweating, Sears stood at the center of the camp, power of destruction lingering in his fingertips, more instinctively held as if expecting another strike. It faded slowly as his red eyes swept over the camp, not in anger but assessment. It was a horrid sight. After a few moments of this, he muttered, almost to the fog that clung to his clothes. This was not the brute force we anticipated. Footsteps beside him. Serafal now stood quietly at his side as he finished. They saw the defense, and then chose the answer. Not even looking up at her fractured, crumbling form of her ice that was still clinging high above and weeping meltwater, Serafal's gaze stayed on the ground and what her shield had created. A moment of silence before softly, breathlessly, she spoke. I made that. There was no answer to the fact, just recognition. Then her voice dropped even lower. Serafal added, I gave it shape, gave it structure, and... The silence was barely manageable as she uttered, and they turned it into a weapon. Adaptive. Zekrum's voice came from behind the two Satans, but none of the three looked away from the sight. Well, he did, looking beyond the dead and ash, at the distant figures that had slowed their approach. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but confirmation. After a moment, he corrected his earlier statement. No worse, they're not reacting to us but studying us. With a soft, slow exhale, Sears commented, we cannot approach this as we have been. No, Zekrum countered instantly, not looking at his descendant. We cannot afford to. They're coming. Serafal announced suddenly with eyes widened, her senses fuzzy still due to the chakra-laced humidity and shock dulling her abilities. She turned to the tree line beyond Ground Zero, that suddenly looked a lot more menacingly inevitable. The scattered survivors attempted to rise, some did. Others resigned to their fates and didn't, as Sears gritted his teeth and then declared. All units, regroup. He stepped forward, his power flared, controlled and precise, cutting through the haze like a signal flare as he ordered. Form on me, defensive perimeter. Yet, the response. No formations answered. The line remained ruined. Only staggered, delayed movement, blind, burned, and very clearly disoriented. There was a strained, my lord. Sears' red eyes sharpened and hardened in understanding, then muttered, they timed this perfectly. Indeed. Zekrum stated with something dangerously close to acknowledgement in his tone. Serafal whispered, her power spiking too. They won't make it in time. How long? Sears inquired carefully, but not getting an answer only confirmed what he already knew. Those shadows in the tree line were not, in fact, his imagination. His thoughts ran at speeds that light would be concerned about, trying to figure out a way to end this quickly. To stop this escalating further. To usher peace between them. This has gone on too long and too far. Zekrum will need to take responsibility for this, to save face and remove his authority, then they will. Unfortunately, the red-haired Satan had no time left as a large crash broke through the perimeter at that moment, blades of wind slicing through the few survivors and blasting the ash and debris apart to reveal the golden-haired Narian, a Shinto divine katana in one hand, and a shorter blade in the other. A thundering, ground-rupturing explosion blasted apart rock, dirt, glass, and body alike as the black bear Yukai sage known as Aoi landed within the perimeter. At the same time a wave of pure red flames engulfed a section of the few survivors, their screams short-lived as out stepped Natsuo, the flame sage. An Arctic front sealed a few in pure, solid ice and announced the presence of Miyuki, the Yukiheim and Sage of Ice, with her fingers already filled with needles and eyeing up the next set of defenders. Growling, Sears muttered, we have to halt them. Just as he went to leap forward, two more figures appeared from behind the advancing sages. One being the voluptuous-figured, long black-haired, hazel golden-eyed former devil known as Kuroka. The other, vibrant blue, shoulder-length hair, cat ears, and blue tails with a flame-like pattern. Serafal gasped. That girl looks like Menma, when I caught him in that ice back at the school. Yet said woman claws ignited in azure black flames as she cut through yet another devil, Kuroka appearing beside her and pouncing on another struggling officer. Sears X glanced to Zekrom and near enough snarled, "If they call for your head, do not expect us to protect it." Zekrom stared back, face equally as stern. "Do not threaten me, boy. We shall hold the line while the technicians fix our escape." Not bothering with him any further, Sears X and Serafal launched forward to try and protect what was left against a foe they had greatly underestimated and won't again. This it for today, guys. This was the part 13 of What If Naruto Was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu X High School DxD. Stay tuned for more.